To security expert Igor Khokhlov. Good to see you. Thanks for coming into the studio. As I say, our main thoughts tonight, before we pick apart what may be behind this, is with the thoughts of the people that are deceased, their friends and families, and the people caught up in it. Russia was very quick to offer its condolences, and President Medvedev was very quickly on the phone to offer his support as well to the Belarusian authorities, saying that Russia would help wherever it could. Belarusian president's taking a firm hand here. He was very quick to visit that metro station, to lay flowers, and also to say that he was in control, that he was the guy that was going to look after the investigation here. I'm just quoting. He says that the government has been challenged by the attackers, and he says this challenge needs an adequate response. What could the implications be now after this terrorist attack?
You know, first of all, we have to remember that for over than 16 years, Belarusian citizens have been trading in their political rights for the sake of security and stability. And you know, political stability and security from different threats, including terrorist threats, are a highly valued commodity in the post-Soviet republics. So now it's a major challenge for Lukashenko and for his regime, because for the first time maybe in 16 years, he has failed to provide that feeling of security that was so important for Belarusian people.
Will the general public really think that, or is it just one of these things that you, no matter how hard you try, a place like that is a soft target, and if someone is determined enough, no matter how much security you put in, no matter how many promises you give, you can't guard against every eventuality. We saw it here in Moscow, we saw it last year in the metro, we saw it earlier on this year in Domodedovo and the airport, you see it in London, you see it around the world. Really, you can't really hold the president of Belarus responsible for this. Surely his people won't, will they?
You know, that's not the matter of responsibility. I can't agree more that, you know, terrorists attacking soft targets, schools, hospitals, public facilities, underground stations. You physically cannot surround each underground station with a tank regiment. But we have to understand that terrorists understand psychology very well, and people always feel very insecure when such awful acts of terror happen. And definitely people put some responsibility onto the authorities. All the authorities, although it's quite hard to provide security for all soft targets all over the territory of the Republic. But anyway, you know, terror is the weapon of the weak. Weak who are not heard, weak who cannot declare their rights in political way, in the legal procedure. They have to apply for methods of terror. Usually those who are not popular among the population, we see it in Russia, North Caucasus, you see, those movements, Islamist movements, which are not popular and they are not supported by the local population, they are coming from abroad. They have to use terrorist practice in Russia to attract attention to themselves. Because, you know, if you enjoy public support, you can win parliamentary elections.
Lukashenko tonight making some comment that he thought that this could have come from outside of Belarus. We've also had various guests on tonight saying, well, you know, there are no big terrorist groups that do target Belarus. There's no one really particularly that stands out. I mean, there was a bomb back in 2008 on the, say, metro. Nobody ever claimed responsibility for that, I gather. Nobody was ever found to be responsible for it. I mean, who could have done this? Now the official investigation is in its very early days up and running, and they are looking, and they're calling it a terrorist investigation. Who could it have been then?
You know, terrorist organizations do not necessarily claim responsibility for their terrorist attacks. Many of them just need to instill fear. You know, Al-Qaeda has never taken responsibility for 9/11 and for exploding USS Cole. So in this case, we could see it could be a strategy of terrorist groups to destabilize the situation in the country. And we also have to understand that many terrorist groups, for instance, Islamic groups and many other groups, they don't terrorize particular states. They terrorize the very idea of civil, secular government. And it doesn't matter for them very much whether they explode bombs in London, in Minsk, or in Moscow. You know, Russian terrorist activity is not homegrown. Terrorists who conduct their awful acts of terror in Russia, they are coming from abroad, and it could easily be the same story in Belarus.
Minsk, a capital, okay, it's not a huge capital with population of about 2 million, isn't it? I mean, that metro there is the fifth largest subway in the CIS. No matter how you look at it, during rush hour, a huge amount of people are going to be down there. Is there anything at all that could be done? I mean, Russia's had to deal with this, London's had to deal with it, many countries around the world have had to deal with this. Is there anything more maybe that could have been applied security-wise to those underground stations in Belarus? Or maybe to the people there now that may have had perhaps a more relaxed attitude to terrorism, hadn't been expecting it, maybe do they have to be more vigilant in future? Is it going to change the way people think in the capital in Minsk?
You know, first of all, I have to say that terrorists have picked up the perfect target. This underground station is the station where people change line between the two lines in Belarusian underground, and this underground line is exactly under the presidential palace of Lukashenko, the seat of his power. So they have found a perfect target to show that Lukashenko doesn't control the situation in the republic. Of course, Belarusian security services will have to reconsider all their strategy fighting terrorism, because Lukashenko has boasted for years that due to his rule, due to his regime, Belarusian people can feel secure from terrorist attacks. But now we know that no one, even Belarus, is immune from those terrorist attacks, and definitely they will have to reconsider the whole strategy. And you know, Russian President Medvedev immediately offered his help and assistance in dealing with this issue, because Russian expertise in this field is very significant. You know, Russian security forces, I think, have proven to be one of the most effective, maybe the most effective in the world in fighting terrorism, because, you know, this counterinsurgency operation in the North Caucasus, it has been a success. We know that, you know, in Grozny, the city where they were fighting, including heavy artillery just 10 years ago, now international rock stars come all over the world. The champion of the world, Brazilian team, comes there to play football. So we now see that Russians, with the help of locals, have managed to turn Grozny, the seat of those terrorists, into a European world-class city. So
and Igor, as you're speaking, as we're looking at these pictures, well, let's see if we can get them up again as we're looking at the pictures of the people on stretchers on the side of the road there. We saw the footage coming out a bit earlier on, actually, just as it was happening, somebody had their mobile telephone and they were showing it. You could see the smoke. I guess the buck stops, really, that you can't really stop somebody with a bomb going down to a metro like this. It has to be stopped, as you say, more at grassroots, doesn't it? Because what can you do when you've got thousands of people coming through the stars? They want to move, they don't want to be held up, they don't want security checks. At the end of the day, there's nothing you can't really stop a bomber from going down into a metro station, can you?
Yes, actually, it's a big problem. You know, terrorism is a very cheap and effective weapon. You don't need millions of dollars to wage a terrorist attack. All you need is a few determined people, a few dozen $1,000 to organize that all. But, you know, definitely Russia has already reconsidered its policy, and we know that Russia has made significant progress in fighting insurgency, given the fact that those terrorists come into Russia from abroad. In Russia, we have almost no homegrown terrorism. And, of course, Belarus and Belarusian security services, they have to reconsider their strategy completely. They have to understand that Belarus is not immune from terrorists.
OK, Igor Khokhlov, good to have you on the programme, security expert as you are. Thank you very much.